So, let's talk about the Old Testament. Have you ever thought about how one of its biggest, most central themes is real estate? I know, it sounds a little weird, but it's this powerful looping story, you know? It's about a home that was given, then lost, and then promised all over again. And each time, the promise just gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I know. Real estate sounds a little out of place, right? But seriously, this idea of land is this incredible thread that just weaves through the whole narrative. It connects everything, from this perfect garden at the very beginning of the story, all the way to the renewal of the entire cosmos by the end.
All right, so to really get a handle on this whole cycle of loss and promise, we've got to go way back, right back to the beginning. Because it all starts not just with what the land is physically, but what it was always meant to be.
So in Genesis, when we talk about land, we're not just talking about dirt and trees. Think of it more as a perfect, ordered environment. It's the place where God plans to live with his people. So it's a gift, right? But it's got these two sides to it. It's both physical and spiritual. It's this amazing spot where heaven and earth are supposed to overlap completely.
And this was the ideal. This was the goal, a place of just perfect harmony between God, people, and all of creation. You could say it was the original home.
But then, through disobedience, Adam and Eve get expelled from that land. The whole ideal gets shattered. And that one act, that expulsion, sets up the central problem that the rest of the Old Testament is basically trying to solve. How is God going to bring his people back home?
So now we get into the really interesting part. That first exile from the garden, it's not a one-and-done thing. What's so fascinating is how this pattern, you get a home, there's a failure, and then there's an exile, it just repeats itself over and over again. It's this powerful cycle that drives the whole story. But here's the kicker. Each time it happens, the promise of return gets even bigger.
You can actually trace this pattern through 4 huge moments in the story. You've got Adam and Eve, Noah, Abraham, and then the nation of Israel. Each one is like an echo of the last, but it keeps building on that original promise. It's this constant rhythm of loss and hope, and it really defines the entire narrative.
Let's take Noah, for example. His story isn't just a simple do-over. It's actually designed to sound just like the original creation story. So, the flood, it's like a decreation, you know? It pushes the world back to that watery, formless, and void state from Genesis 1. But then, just like in the beginning, dry land emerges from the water. It's a huge sign that God isn't just scrapping the project, he's committed to renewing it.
And check this out. This is what really nails it down. God gives Noah and his family the exact same command he gave to Adam and Eve. Be fruitful and increase in number. It's a total renewal of the original mission for humanity. A second chance, basically.
Okay, so fast forward a few centuries, and guess what? The cycle keeps going. The call of Abraham and the promise of a land, that isn't just some random event. It's God's direct answer to the whole problem of exile. The plan is, through Abraham and his family, to start bringing people back home, to a specific land, a place of blessing where God will be present.
But you can probably guess what happens next. The cycle repeats. Again. The nation of Israel finally makes it into the promised land. But just like Adam and Eve back in the garden, they disobey and they get exiled. Again. So now the story is at this other massive low point, and we're left asking the exact same question. Okay, how is God going to fulfill his promise now?
It feels like this cycle of failure is just unbreakable, right? But this is where the story takes this huge dramatic turn. The answer comes not from another conquest, but from the prophets. And their vision for the future? It's way, way bigger than anyone could have expected.
Yeah, after all these repeated failures, the scale of God's solution just explodes. We're not talking about just one piece of real estate in the Middle East anymore, not by a long shot.
And here's the crucial point. The promise gets like bumped up a key. It goes from, let's get you back to a specific piece of land, to, let's renew the entire cosmos. The new home isn't just a place, it's a whole new creation.
And what's so cool is how the prophet Isaiah describes this new creation. It's absolutely filled with these direct callbacks to the Garden of Eden, but it's all on a cosmic scale now. It's about reversing the curse, ending injustice, restoring that original ideal, but for everyone, everywhere.
Okay, so a new creation sounds amazing, but it raises a pretty big question. How is all this supposed to happen? Well, the Psalms pick up on this theme and add another layer. They connect this giant cosmic promise not just to a place, but to a person, a future king, a ruler.
right? So the Psalms start talking about this messianic king, this promised ideal ruler. And get this, his inheritance isn't just the nation of Israel. It's the nations, plural, the ends of the earth. The scope just becomes completely global. The promised land is now the whole world.
So if you step back and look at the whole thing, you can see this promise just growing and expanding. It starts small and specific, right? A garden for Adam and Eve, then a nation for Abraham's family. But by the time we get to the end of the Old Testament, it has morphed into this massive promise of a renewed creation for all people, for all of humanity.
And that's where the Old Testament leaves us. It ends with this grand, cosmic, but still unfulfilled promise. And it perfectly sets the stage for the New Testament. We're left hanging with these huge questions. How is this new creation actually going to happen? Who is this king? And how is he going to finally bring his people home to inherit the entire earth?